One reason we think you haven't heard more about them is that many satanic crimes are simply not recognized as such. Take a look at this report, please. These ritualistic crimes are everywhere, and yet in most communities they are either overlooked or underreported. There's an example going on right now here in Kansas City that tells us why. In this house, in a quiet residential neighborhood, a series of brutally violent, horrible crimes have been committed, and yet the police and prosecutor in this town seem either unable or unwilling to draw the obvious connection between what happened here and Satanism.
All I know is the whole thing was evil.
This 22-year-old, call him Jay, escaped from the House of Horrors wearing only a dog collar. For 4 days, he had been ritualistically tortured by a man named Bob Berdella.
He took the transformer and hooked it to my genitals and stepped back and took pictures while I'm flopping around.
What a sick dog.
It seemed to never end, you know.
After Jay escaped through a window by burning the ropes that bound him to the bed, the police arrested Berdella. When they searched his home, they found over 250 photographs of young men, including Jay, in the process of being tortured, in some cases fatally. Hidden in the walls of the home, they also found a human skull.
He had pictures of guys that he had did things to. Kids tied up and with marks on them and things.
Apparently, Berdella would pick up young men, usually hustlers like Joe, many of them runaways who cluster in Kansas City Strip.
I need $25 so you
For a small amount of money, these kids go anywhere to do anything with anyone. Unfortunately, some went home with Berdella, whose involvement with devil worship was easily apparent. There was, for example, a satanic symbol on the outside wall of his house. His business card seemed straight from hell, and he ran this macabre shop of horrors, possibly stocking it with his own unique hobby. By agreement with the district attorney, Berdella was allowed to plead to 1 count of murder. He received a life sentence, but many people in this community are outraged that the investigation went no further. Did the police pursue these allegations of satanic involvement?
The police department, it's my understanding, called in some people who knew about witchcraft to talk to them about that. That particular aspect of the case basically went nowhere.
County legislator Carol Cole disagrees. Why do you think there is no attention being paid to that ritual aspect of this case?
You're in the heart of America, the Bible Belt, and we hate to think that people like that live next door to us. We're turning our backs on acting like it doesn't happen. We're putting our hands over our eyes as if it didn't occur here, that it was just a murder.
This is Detective Lee Orr of the neighboring Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. Do you believe there is a satanic aspect to these horrible crimes?
Yes, I'm sure there is, yes.
We've also had contact with people that have come out of the occult, Satan worship, who have definitely made statements and who I've interviewed that state that Mr. Berdella was involved at a higher level than most in the occult.
If these allegations exist, as we merit to you that they do, isn't it reasonable that if you pursued them with vigor, you might find evidence that could pin more of these crimes on this man, that might help solve some of the cases of missing children and missing young adults that you have in this and surrounding communities?
There isn't any question that if there are people who have information about him being involved in witchcraft or Satanism, and that information has not been given to us, that we would love to have it because it would be further leads that we could follow.
Here perhaps are some leads for investigators to follow. Item: police reports obtained by us show local authorities have long been aware that devil worshippers were conducting large-scale ceremonies in the Kansas City area. Item: this young man says he was an eyewitness to a sexual orgy at Berdella's house, one with heavy satanic overtones. And item: this woman claims she met Berdella through her former husband, a high priest in a local satanic cult.
We were at a meeting in the area, and he was up on the platform in a throne, which symbolizes that that sacrifice at that particular meeting was for him, was done for him.
So he was in an exalted position. He was a VIP.
Yes, he was.
What happened there at that ceremony?
There was a young man killed, a young boy. He was 16 years old.
Did you ever tell the police about any of this?
No, I didn't.
Why?
People don't believe you when you talk about these things. People just do not believe these things happen.
Remember, aside from the torture and sodomy of Jay, who escaped, Berdella has pled guilty to just one murder, a runaway whose skull was found inside his house. A second murder charge is pending. Yet police sources tell us Berdella is suspected in at least 7 homicides. When they excavated his backyard, they found remains of 3 people. Paul Howell believes his missing 19-year-old son was among them.
They found a head right up here, I believe.
A skull?
A skull right up in this area somewhere.
It is one thing for law enforcement to be uninformed. It's quite another, though, for them to refuse to follow known leads. Paul Howell alleges they did exactly that, with the information he provided from his own investigation. For 3 years, he says, he begged them to investigate Berdella's suspected connection with his boy's disappearance.
I dug through his trash and found different things. At one time, I thought it was dog remains. Later on, after the investigation, the police come in. 3 years later, I found out that this is the way they said Bob disposed of some of the waste of the human remain. He put them in dog food bags and set them out in the trash.
What must it be like to a father to think that his own son was disposed of in pieces in someone's garbage?
It's just very upsetting, naturally, and want to get even. You want to find everybody that's involved beside Bob and hope that it don't happen to anybody else's kids.
It apparently also happened to Harriet's kid, Bonnie's husband, James, who disappeared in 1985.
When James first disappeared even, we begged him to do something to go in Berdella's house to get a search warrant for any reason to try to find my son in there, because it had been told to us that he was possibly chained up in the house in there.
Photographs of James' tortured, apparently murdered body were among those seized by police.
Will you charge Berdella with the murder of James Ferris?
That is not something that I can tell you yes or no.
Will you charge Berdella with the murder of Jerry Howell?
And again, I can't tell you whether or not there will be charges brought against Mr. Berdella or anybody else for the murder of Mr. Howell.
Is it possible that by narrowing the focus of the investigation, people who are involved in these awful acts are still free?
Yes, there's no question about it. You cannot subdue individuals and photograph them, and you're in the photos by yourself. So there is a great implication that somebody else that participated in this is still at loose, and they're at large in this city, and you're going to be reading about it again in another 12 or 16 months.
I hope she's not right, but stand up. This is Detective Sergeant Lee Orr from the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. You saw him in the video piece. This is retired Detective Michael McKee of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. Gentlemen, the Kansas City Star is reporting as late as yesterday that the district attorney in your community is still insisting that the Berdella case of serial murders or alleged serial murders is not related to Satanism, is not a ritual crime. You were one of the first cops on the scene. Do you believe that this case is satanically related?
It's my opinion that it is. We recovered a ceremonial robe from the bedroom. When we excavated the backyard and dug up the skull in the backyard, it was buried with a jar of feathers and had some burnt wood with it. We also recovered numerous books on the occult from the residence of Mr. Berdella.
Now, whether these cases are not being treated as ritual crimes because of embarrassment to the community or because it's easier for cops just to prosecute them as simple homicides, we don't know. Coming up next, we have talked in this program so far, and you have heard the words about child abuse. A woman by the name of Cheryl Horton and others tell an even more grotesque story, ladies and gentlemen. Having babies to be turned over for human sacrifice to Satan. And we'll deal with that when we come back.